the weapon they never expected to use. May 21, 1940. Just after dawn. A beet field outside Arras, northern France. Cold mist hangs low over the ground, clinging to the hedgerows and the churned earth. You can smell damp soil, crushed leaves, cordite from a night of scattered skirmishes. Somewhere ahead, engines growl. Not trucks. Not half-tracks. Heavier. Slower. Steel moving with confidence. Lance Corporal William Bill Hargreaves of the 1st Battalion, Durham Light Infantry presses his cheek into the rough wood of a rifle stock that feels wrong for this war. It is too long. Too heavy. Too old. The boy's anti-tank rifle rests on its bipod in the mud, barrel pointed toward a shallow rise where the fog is beginning to thin. Officially, this weapon should not be here. It was nearly written off before the war even began. Too bulky. Too punishing on the shoulder. Too slow to reload. Against modern armor, the manual said, it would be marginal at best. Yet here it is. And here he is. Bill tightens his grip as the first German Panzer crests the rise. The tank appears like a shape cut from the fog, angular and solid, its tracks chewing the earth with an unhurried rhythm. A Panzer III. Not a scout. Not light. This is front-line armor. The kind of thing the British expected to meet with artillery or dedicated anti-tank guns. Neither of which are anywhere near this field. Behind Bill, Sergeant Thomas Reed crouches low, peering over the hedge. Wait, Reed murmurs. Closer. The Panzer advances, turret forward, commander's hatch open just enough for a head to scan the field. Bill can hear it now clearly. The clank of track links. The rattle of tools bolted to steel. The engine's steady confidence. The boy's rifle was designed years earlier, when tanks were thinner, slower, less sure of themselves. It fires a massive .55-inch cartridge, nearly an inch longer than anything Bill has trained with. The recoil is brutal. The muzzle blast concussive. Most soldiers hate it. Before the war, procurement officers had quietly discussed replacing it. Some units received only a handful. Others were told to treat it as a stopgap, something to be used until proper weapons arrived. Those weapons never came. Bill's eye stays fixed on the vision slit as the tank closes to less than 300 yards. His breath fogs the rear sight. His shoulder already aches in anticipation of what is coming. Now, Reed says. Bill exhales and squeezes the trigger. The rifle detonates. The sound is not a crack but a violent tearing noise, like canvas ripped apart by an explosion. The recoil slams into Bill's shoulder, driving him backward into the mud. For a fraction of a second, his vision whites out. The armor-piercing round strikes the Panzer's front plate and deflects, shrieking away in a shower of sparks. No penetration. The tank does not stop. Reload, Reed snaps. Bill fights the bolt, muscles straining as he hauls it back and feeds another enormous cartridge into the chamber. His hands shake. The tank is closer now. Close enough that he can see mud splattered across the hull. Close enough to smell hot oil. Another boy's rifle fires from somewhere down the line. Another impact. Another scream of metal. Then something changes. Bill adjusts his aim lower, remembering a lecture half heard months earlier. Not the thickest armor. Not the turret. The sides. The running gear. The places the designers had not expected riflemen to target. He fires again. This time the round slams into the Panzer's track assembly. There is a sharp crack followed by a grinding scream. The tank lurches. One side dips violently as a track link shatters. The Panzer slews sideways and stops dead. The engine revs. The turret jerks left and right, searching for the source of the hit. Machine gun fire erupts, stitching the hedge above Bill's head, clipping leaves and branches into green shrapnel. But the tank is no longer moving. To the left, another Panzer halts as well, its crew suddenly unsure. This is not how this is supposed to go. Infantry are meant to scatter. Rifles are meant to be noise, not threat. The boys' rifles fire again. And again. One round punches through a thinner side plate at close range, fragments ricocheting inside the hull. A hatch slams shut. Smoke curls from a vision port. The Panzer commander disappears from view. For a moment, the advance stalls. In that moment, the obsolete weapon proves something no one expected. Not because it is perfect. Not because it is modern. But because it works when nothing else is there. Bill cycles the bolt again, shoulders screaming, ears ringing, hands numb. He does not think about doctrine or procurement failures. He thinks about the tank that stopped. About the crew inside it, suddenly vulnerable. Ahead of him, German armor hesitates in a field it was meant to cross without resistance. And in the mud outside Arras, a rifle nearly abandoned by history begins to rewrite the fight. When doctrine collided with reality. The disabled Panzer burns quietly now, a thin ribbon of smoke rising into the pale morning sky. Its engine has stalled, but the machine gun still chatters in short, angry bursts, spraying the hedgerow where Bill and the others lie pinned. Bill reloads again. His fingers are stiff, clumsy from shock and recoil. Each cartridge feels heavier than the last. Around him, the field that had been silent minutes earlier is alive with noise. Tanks braking. Orders shouted in German. The flat crack of boys' rifles answering back. This was never part of the plan. The British counterattack near Arras was improvised almost from the start. Units thrown together under pressure. Infantry advancing without proper anti-tank support. The doctrine said armor should be met by guns, not rifles. Yet here, scattered along a shallow defensive line, a handful of men armed with weapons already considered obsolete are now the only thing between steel and collapse. Sergeant Reed crawls closer, shouting over the noise. Target the sides. Tracks vision slits. Do not waste rounds. Down the line, Private Alan Cooper braces his own boy's rifle against a fence post. He fires at less than 150 yards. The round strikes the side of a Panzer II, thinner skinned, lighter. The impact punches inward with a brutal metallic thud. Inside the tank, spall fragments tear loose, ricocheting like knives. The turret freezes. The Panzer slews to a stop, its crew stunned rather than destroyed. Smoke pours from the engine deck as the crew bails out, scrambling for cover. Cooper watches them run, disbelief etched across his face. This weapon was never meant to do that. Not according to the manuals. German commanders watching from behind the advance feel something unsettling creep into their calculations. Infantry fire is not supposed to halt armor. Not here. Not now. But tanks are stopping. Crews are buttoning up. Movement slows. A Panzer III swings its turret toward Bill's position. The barrel lowers. This time, the tank fires. The shell tears through the hedge, exploding behind them with a concussion that slams Bill flat. Dirt rains down. Someone screams. Shrapnel snaps through branches like snapping twigs. Bill pushes himself up, ears ringing, and sights again. The tank is broadside now, angling to engage another threat. Its side armor is exposed, thinner than the frontal plate. He fires. The round strikes just below the turret ring. It does not punch clean through, but the impact cracks the armor plate, sending fragments inward. Inside, something breaks. The turret jerks, then locks. The Panzer fires blindly, then stops. Smoke seeps from seams that were never meant to leak. The Germans begin to pull back, not in retreat, but in caution. Armor that was meant to roll through infantry now pauses to reassess. Each halted tank forces others to bunch up. Each delay compounds the problem. From a shallow rise behind the British line, Lieutenant Colonel Harold Franklin watches through binoculars, stunned. He had expected this counterattack to fail quickly, buying little more than time. Instead, German armor is hesitating under rifle fire. He turns to his adjutant. Tell the platoons. Concentrate boys' rifles. Do not engage unless you have a clear shot. What was dismissed as a stopgap is now being used deliberately. Not as a tank killer in the traditional sense, but as a disruption weapon. Break tracks. Blind crews. Force hesitation. Slow momentum. Bill fires again. His shoulder is numb now, pain replaced by a deep, spreading ache. He barely feels the recoil. He only watches for results. Another track breaks. Another tank halts. The field is littered with immobile steel, some burning, others simply silent. German infantry begin to fan out, trying to suppress the riflemen, but the moment is already slipping. This is not victory. Not yet. But it is something the Germans did not plan for. And all of it is being done by a weapon that, on paper, should already be gone. As the smoke thickens and the sound of engines fades slightly, Bill realizes something important. The rifle in his hands may not win the war. But here, in this field, it has changed the rules. The cost of effectiveness. The lull does not last. German artillery begins to answer the problem in the only language it trusts. High explosive shells whistle in from beyond the fields, slamming into the hedgerows and shallow depressions where the riflemen have taken cover. The ground convulses. Earth and stone hammer down like rain. Bill presses himself flat as another shell bursts nearby, the shockwave punching the air from his lungs. The boy's rifle lies beside him, its long barrel already streaked with mud and soot. Around him, men shout for medics. Someone is not moving. Effectiveness has a price. The boy's anti-tank rifle was never meant to be fired this often. The recoil system struggles under repeated shots. Springs heat. Bolts grow stiff. Shoulders bruise and then go numb. Some men stuff cloth under their tunics to soften the blow. Others simply grit their teeth and accept the punishment. Private Cooper fires again and cries out, dropping the rifle. His collarbone has cracked under the accumulated impact. Two men drag him back, replacing him without a word. There is no time. German infantry pushes forward now, advancing cautiously behind the immobilized tanks. Machine guns rake the hedges, forcing the rifle teams to keep their heads down. Every shot must count. Sergeant Reed crawls to Bill, his face smeared with dirt and blood from a cut above his eye. "We cannot stay here much longer," he says. "But we will make them pay for every yard." Bill nods and lines up another shot through drifting smoke. A Panzer attempts to reverse, its damaged track grinding uselessly. Bill aims low again, focusing on the exposed wheel assembly. He fires. The impact shatters a road wheel. The tank jerks violently, then slumps. The engine screams and dies. Inside the tank, the crew is alive, but trapped. The hatches stay shut. Word spreads quickly along the British line. The boy's rifle is not killing tanks outright. It is doing something worse. It is turning them into obstacles. Burning or disabled hulls block lanes of advance, forcing following units to bunch up under fire. German commanders respond by pulling tanks back and pushing infantry forward, trying to locate and silence the rifle teams. Mortar rounds begin to fall, plunging into the hedges with sharp, snapping explosions. Bill fires one last round before Reed slaps his helmet. "Move. Now." They drag the rifle back, crawling through a shallow ditch as bullets crack overhead. Bill's ears ring. His shoulder feels swollen, unresponsive. He barely notices until he tries to lift the weapon again and his arm shakes uncontrollably. They regroup behind a low stone wall, where more boys' rifles are already set up. The weapon that was meant to be rare is suddenly everywhere. Men who had mocked it weeks earlier now reach for it instinctively. A runner arrives, breathless. Armor reports stalled across the front. Enemy reorganizing. Franklin receives the report and allows himself a brief exhale. The counterattack is still dangerous, still costly, but the momentum has shifted. German armor is no longer dictating the pace. The field outside Arras is now a graveyard of metal and smoke, not because of superior technology, but because of stubborn adaptation under fire. Bill rests the rifle against the wall, hands trembling. He looks at the long barrel, the oversized bolt, the crude iron sights. This is not an elegant weapon. It bruises, deafens, and exhausts its user. But it has done what it needed to do. As the firing slackens and the Germans pull back to reassess, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Obsolete does not mean useless. Not when the alternative is nothing at all. From stopgap to doctrine. The afternoon sun burns away the last of the morning mist, revealing the battlefield in harsh detail. Disabled tanks sit at odd angles across the fields, some blackened and still smoldering, others eerily intact but lifeless. The ground between them is torn apart by shell holes and churned earth, marked by the paths of men who advanced and then pulled back under fire. German armor has withdrawn beyond effective rifle range. Not routed. Not destroyed. But cautious now. Behind the British line, officers gather around hastily drawn maps laid out on the hood of a truck. Lieutenant Colonel Franklin speaks quietly, his voice tight with exhaustion. They are not pressing. They are regrouping. A captain frowns. Sir, with respect, they should have rolled straight through us. Franklin nods. Yes. They should have. What stopped them was not supposed to work. That is the problem. Word spreads rapidly through the brigade. Tank crews report vision blocks shattered. Track assemblies damaged. Turrets jammed. Infantry officers report tanks refusing to advance without close support. All caused by concentrated fire from rifles that pre-war assessments had labeled inadequate. The boys' anti-tank rifle was designed in an era when tanks were expected to be thin-skinned and slow. By 1940, armor had evolved faster than doctrine. On paper, the rifle had already fallen behind. In reality, it had found a role no one had formally planned for. Disruption. Bill sits with his back against the stone wall, helmet off, shirt darkened with sweat and grime. A medic wraps his shoulder tightly, muttering about bruising that will turn purple by morning. You will feel that for weeks, the medic says. Bill manages a tired smile. Worth it. Nearby, Sergeant Reed oversees the redistribution of ammunition. Each boy's rifle team is now paired with spotters. Angles are discussed. Engagement distances argued over. What began as desperate improvisation is being shaped into method. German reconnaissance probes forward cautiously as the day wears on. Each time a tank edges closer, boys' rifles shift position. Shots are held until targets expose a weak point. No more firing at frontal armor unless absolutely necessary. Every round is deliberate. A Panzer IV attempts a probing advance in the late afternoon. Its thicker armor shrugs off an initial hit. The crew grows confident and pushes forward another 20 yards. Then a rifle round slams into the idler wheel. The tank halts abruptly, nose dipping as the track fails. Smoke curls from the engine deck as the crew scrambles to bail out. Infantry rush forward to cover them, but the message is clear. Armor is no longer free to maneuver. German commanders now face a dilemma. Advance tanks without infantry and risk immobilization. Advance infantry first and lose speed and protection. Either choice slows the timetable. And in a campaign built on speed, delay is dangerous. As dusk approaches, orders come down for the British units to disengage and withdraw. The counterattack has achieved its limited objective. German forces have been checked and delayed far longer than expected. Bill helps carry the boys' rifle back toward the assembly area. It feels heavier now than it did in the morning. Not just from fatigue, but from what it represents. That night, under a canvas tarp lit by a single shaded lantern, officers file reports. They write carefully, choosing words that will be read by men far from this field. Rifle fire immobilized tanks. Anti-tank rifles effective at close range when used against vulnerable components. Recommend retention and revised employment doctrine. These are not emotional conclusions. They are practical ones. Born from necessity and paid for in bruised shoulders and broken bones. Somewhere deeper in France, German planners revise their own assumptions. Infantry screens are increased. Tanks are ordered to keep distance where possible. Hesitation enters a system built on relentless momentum. None of this will stop the campaign. France will still fall. The weapon will not change that. But it has done something else. It has bought time. It has forced adaptation. It has proven that a discarded tool can still shape a battlefield when used intelligently. As Bill lies awake that night, shoulder throbbing, ears still ringing, he thinks of the first tank that stopped. Of the shock on the enemy side. Of the moment when steel hesitated. The rifle rests beside him, oil wiped thin across its metal. Tomorrow, it will be carried again. No longer as an embarrassment. But as a necessity. The pattern repeats across the war. June 1941. The forests outside Rzyni, Lithuania. Morning light filters through tall pines, cutting long shadows across sandy soil. The sound is different here. Not hedgerows and fields, but wind in branches and the distant rumble of engines moving along forest roads. German armor advances east, confident after a year of victories. Their tanks are heavier now. Better protected. Their doctrine refined. Infantry and armor move together, practiced and disciplined. Opposing them are Soviet units scrambling to respond to the invasion. Among them, soldiers armed with weapons already considered outdated by their own designers. The 45mm anti-tank gun is scarce. Mines are few. Artillery is disorganized. What remains are rifles. Heavy. Awkward. Powerful. The Soviet PTRD and PTRS anti-tank rifles were conceived as temporary solutions, not long-term answers to modern armor. Like the boys' rifle before them, they were meant to fill a gap until something better arrived. That better option is still on trains far to the east. Red Army rifleman Ivan Petrov lies prone behind a fallen log, his PTRD braced awkwardly against the bark. The rifle is long and unforgiving. The recoil will slam straight through him. He has seen men dislocate shoulders firing it incorrectly. A German Panzer 38T rolls into view, tracks whispering over sand. The tank is light by German standards, but still deadly to exposed infantry. Petrov waits as he was taught. Not for the hull. For the suspension. He fires. The impact shatters a wheel and sends fragments spraying. The tank veers and stops. Another rifle cracks. Another tank halts. Across the Eastern Front, the same lesson is learned again and again. Anti-tank rifles cannot kill the newest tanks head-on. But they do not have to. They blind. They cripple. They delay. In North Africa, British units once again haul the boys' rifle back into service. Against early Italian armor and the lighter German models, it proves unexpectedly effective at close range. Desert fighting exposes sides and rear plates. Sand clogs mechanisms already weakened by impact. In Burma, against Japanese tanks with thinner armor, the rifle becomes something close to lethal. Shots punch through plates. Crews abandon vehicles under fire they never expected from infantry. Everywhere, the pattern repeats. Weapons dismissed as obsolete reappear because they answer an immediate need. They are simple. They are portable. They require no complex supply chain. When artillery cannot be moved and air support is absent, they are what the infantry has. Commanders adapt. Manuals are quietly revised. Training emphasizes weak points and coordinated fire. What was once desperation becomes practice technique. But the cost remains high. Recoil injuries pile up. Crews learn to rotate shooters to avoid broken bones. Ammunition is heavy and scarce. Each round must justify its weight. By 1943, true anti-tank weapons begin to replace the rifles. Shaped charge launchers. Rocket weapons. Systems designed from the start to defeat modern armor. Yet the rifles do not disappear immediately. They linger in second-line units. In reserves. In places where nothing else is available. Because soldiers remember. They remember the moment when something old stopped something new. When a tool nearly discarded proved it still had a role. Bill Hargreaves never sees the Eastern Front. By 1942, his shoulder injury has ended his time on the front line. He trains recruits now, demonstrating the boys' rifle with careful movements. He tells them the same thing Sergeant Reed once told him. Do not fight the tank. Fight the parts that make it move. The recruits listen. Not because the weapon is impressive. But because the lesson is. What obsolete really means. March 1945. A ruined village on the western edge of the Rhine. The war is nearly over, but the fighting has not softened. Buildings are shattered. Roads are cratered. Armor still moves cautiously through streets choked with rubble and burned-out vehicles. In a cellar beneath a collapsed house, a Volkssturm unit waits with a mix of weapons pulled from storage depots and museum shelves. Among them is an old anti-tank rifle, its bluing worn thin, its stock scarred by decades of use and neglect. It is no longer issued by any modern army. It has been replaced, improved upon, and officially forgotten. Yet it is here. A young German soldier braces it against a pile of bricks as an American light tank noses into the street above. The tank is not the heaviest of its kind, but it is confident. Its crew believes the infantry threat below them is negligible. The rifle fires. The shot does not destroy the tank. It does not need to. The round strikes the drive sprocket, jamming it hard. The tank halts, blocking the street behind it. American infantry fan out, suddenly cautious, suddenly aware that even now, old tools can still bite. Across the war, this truth has surfaced again and again. Obsolescence is not a switch. It is a gradient. A weapon can be outdated and still dangerous. Limited and still decisive under the right conditions. The boy's rifle, the PTRD, the weapons like them did not win battles alone. They did not reverse campaigns. But they did something just as important. They denied certainty. They punished assumptions. They forced armored units to slow down, to screen, to respect infantry in places where they had once rolled forward without fear. For men like Bill Hargreaves, the lesson stayed long after the rifle was finally retired. In later years, when asked about the weapon, he never called it powerful or advanced. He called it honest. It did exactly what it could do, he once said. Nothing more. Nothing less. On the battlefield outside Arras, in forests, deserts, and ruined cities, that was enough. A weapon filed away as obsolete had stopped modern armor not because it was misunderstood, but because it was used with clarity and necessity. When the war ended, the rifles went back into storage, then into museums. Labeled. Catalogued. Explained in neat plaques. But for a brief, critical time, they were not relics. They were answers.